ليلهم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ليلهم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة. نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح. ليلهم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ليلهم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة. ونحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us from wherever you are in the world. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that this event is held primarily in Borlu on sovereign Wajak Noongar Boja. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and to First Nations people across the continent of so-called Australia. Gedamna Elsabah Cultural Forum, as a group of settler refugees, extends our solidarity to First Nations people across this continent and across the world, and acknowledges that the systems which allow us relative safety here in so-called Australia are the same ones which create oppression and dispossession in this settler colony. We recognize that sovereignty was never ceded. This is and always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Gedamna Elsabah Cultural Forum is concerned with creative and cultural work and the edification of its intersections with civil political resistance. This forum is committed to human rights issues and the effective role of the arts in political and social change. This event we're holding today, during International Human Rights Day, is to raise awareness of the situation in Sudan and to practice active and radical solidarity. Today, you'll hear from poets across the world as they share their poems for Sudan. But Sudan is not the only place that's facing atrocities. So we would like to acknowledge all of the genocides, seen and unseen, everything that our siblings are experiencing across the world, whether it's in Chad or Palestine, and we would like to pay our respects and extend our solidarity. Today, you'll be hearing from fabulous poets and artists from around the world. And this event is actually dedicated to the late and great Sudanese poet, Kamal al-Jazuli. Kamal al-Jazuli passed away in the early hours of Monday, November 6th in Cairo, and will be remembered by his country and abroad for his unequivocal stance for human rights. He's devoted all his career to his work as a lawyer and an activist, and his fathomless creative talent as a poet, writer, and to defending his people's aspirations for justice and democracy. Mr. Abdel-Jazuli was born in 1947, and he studied abroad in the College of International Law and International Relations in the Kiev Governmental University, and his return home to Sudan coincided with a volatile era in Sudanese history. Tension was still in the air following the events of the 1917 the massacre in May of 1917, when the dictatorship butchered many of the Communist Party senior leadership in the aftermath of their aborted coup against President Nimeri. Al-Jazuli was in and out of prison several times during the mid-70s and early 80s, and later in the late 90s following the Islamist coup. Those eventful times have had their imprint on his poetry. Incarceration and persecution feature prominently across his critically acclaimed collection, Omdurman Comes on the 8 o'clock train. In those pieces, he describes his emotions in response to the imminent threat as he remains imprisoned. Besides his poetry collections, Al-Jazuli had 6 other books and hundreds of published articles and research papers on diverse topics ranging from culture and politics, literature, literary criticism, to issues of peace, democracy, civil war, human rights. Some of his poetry and fiction were translated into English, Russian, and Ukrainian. He was a founding member of the Sudanese Writers' Union and served as its Secretary General until 2007. He was a PEN International Laureate and an honorary member of its London office. And this eulogy for the great Kamal Al-Jazuli was written by Ustaz Mr. Adil Babikir. Adil Babikir is a translator and an Arabic content manager at Madallah Investment Company in Abu Dhabi. He's translated and edited several works, including Modern Sudanese Poetry, an anthology published in 2009, and Mensi, a Rare Man in His Own Way by Tayyib Salah. Today, Dr. Vivienne Glance will read 2 poems by Kamal Al-Jazuli, translated by Mr. Adil Babikir.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll read the 2 poems. The first one is called Whispers. It's not murder that I dread, not even a tragic end, nor this door being blown down outright, or them storming in at midnight, their naked guns in full sight. No, not festering wounds, streams of blood, or the wall dotted with fragments of my skull. What I fear the most, I have to say, is fear per se, that devious and elusive thing that in a twinkling can sneak in, whispering deluded excuses, temptingly fancy while stealthily injecting weakness and despondency into the inner pores of my soul. That elegant, eye-catching thing luring me into watching its glaring blade. And once, for a second or two, I am dazzled by the glow. It slips in, splitting me into 2. A half up there in its illusionary world, dying twice, and a half down here, half dead. You are destined to die, and so are they. No one is exempt. So voice your rejection right here. Out there, your defiant voice will come out, pretty strong and vocal. Die here, to live there. And the second poem is called Encounter. In the late hours of the night, off the fence of the grand mosque, a male leper, shabby and frail, stealthily creeps into the bosom of a fellow leper, just as shabby and frail, and they embrace. With palms as camel's hoofs and 3 timber-dry arms, they embrace in the wee hours of the night off the fence of the grand mosque. But the last passerby, who airs his belly on the floor and goes on his way, is too drunk and drowsy to see. He has just blown off an intimate moment bitterly fought for. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vivienne, for reading those translations. Yeah, for beginning this event with such a wonderful way, and we can dedicate it to the late great Commander Jazuli. So our next guest is joining us from Gallagherland in Sydney. Dr. Michelle Hamadache is a Sydney writer of short stories and essays. She has publications in Australia, the UK, and in the US in many journals. She is currently the Director of Creative Writing at Macquarie University. Her writing and research explore representations of Algeria in English, which sounds so cool, by the way. Thank you so much for joining us.
Look, thank you so much. And I am going to start by saying that it's such an honour to be here among poets, and being mostly a teacher, I did the only thing I knew how, which was to write a letter to Afeif. Dear Afeif, thank you for the Blue Nile River. Thank you for my invitation to be among poets. Thank you for my invitation to be a poet for tonight. Dear Afeif, thank you for the Blue Nile River and a town on its banks, for feet cooled with its silt. Thank you for writing poems from prison. Thank you for reminding me that poems matter to the people of Sudan, to people. Dear Afeif, thank you for sending me poems and books of poems. Thank you for reminding me that poems contain sesame oil, yellow-eyed skeletons, grandmothers, blindfolds, teardrops, candlesticks, bruises, heat, sunrise, and rain. That poems say no, poems say yes. Dear Afeif, thank you for the river of the Blue Nile, for words that make bridges that span 1,000 years, 1,000 miles, for words that make bridges between Yisr and bridge, between enter and me. Dear Afeif, thank you for writing poems to remember Mahmoud Muhammad Taha, the people whose names are scratched into walls of the ghost houses, to remember the people who burn in streets from Khartoum to Darfur, to remember streets made for walking, perhaps hand in hand as lovers or children or curious onlookers, made for people rushing to work or rushing back home to grow old and wise and content or cranky, but to grow old with no memories of rape or torture or murder, to grow old with children and grandchildren listening to stories dictated by moons to yawning stars, with no mentions of generals or of Kalashnikovs, only wind and the waves of the Blue Nile River. Dear Afeif, thank you for being the crucible stronger than the mixture of injustice, wanton violence, and oppression you've melted down to make words into bridges over rivers between chasms. Thank you for it, dear.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was gorgeous. And thank you so much for joining us tonight as a poet, and for sharing that wonderful work with all of us. And I'm sure that Afeif, if he was on screen right now, would be grinning quite a lot. Our next speaker is Dr. Vivienne Juguero. Dr. Juguero is a dramatist and educator with plays, films, and songs and articles staged, published, and broadcast in Brazil and abroad. Her PhD and postdoc, one completed in Brazil and with a postdoc completed in Norway, addresses her radical dramatology concept focused on the intrinsic social role of artistic discourses. She is part of, and please forgive me in my terrible pronunciation, my Portuguese has not improved since we last spoke, Bando de Brincatas, Black Writers, and as a dramaturgy collective in Brazil. She works as a teacher at the Nordic. She works as a teacher with the University of Auckland in New Zealand and other international networks, and she's part of the Black Theatre, the Nordic Black Theatre Network in Norway. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here again. I'm honored to be part of this movement called Poetry for Sudan. I really believe that the arts are the way that we have to change the world from the roots. So because of that, I think it's deeply meaningful what you do. And I really feel very attached with the situation in Sudan. Brazil is the second blackest country in the world. We have a huge Afro-descendant community here. I work a lot with Black theater in Brazil. And internationally, as you said, I'm part of the Nordic Black Theatre in Norway as well, and in many other countries. And these beautiful bonds of generosity, I guess sometimes we need to speak loud about how many people are engaged in sharing good perceptions of the world and understanding that the cultural roots are the reason for everything, for the good and for the bad. So we need to change culture. I love a sentence by Mahatma Gandhi that says, "The world has enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed." So we need to understand that the way we guide our emotions and our values are based on our cultural perceptions. So yeah, I have been dedicating my life to study that. And I'm glad to share with you that I have a scientific, huge study on that was published at the Journal of Art and Research in Norway last week. So I shared with you the link in the chat. So if you can share with people in the Facebook page, I think we need to understand that we are aesthetic beings. We have been discussing many ways to change the world, and we have these relevant and impact and important sustainable development goals from the United Nations. But almost never they mention culture, only one time as heritage. And we need to understand that our cultural perceptions are our roots in this world. We are aesthetic beings. So we need to perceive that it's the way to change what we are, the way we are perceiving the world. And yeah, I also pay my respects to all people in Sudan and in other parts of the world, in Palestine, and also the civilians in Israel, and all people among many wars, and even in Brazil, because we don't have a war, but we, especially Black young men, they are murdering Brazil more in all the wars together. And we need to speak loud about that. We need to speak loud about violence against women in Brazil and trans people and LGBTQA+. But we have hope, and we can see many things that are changing. So I would like to share with you a poem that I wrote for Poetry for Sudan, and I have the pleasure to say that it was translated into 15 languages. And I recorded this poem with some partners who work with me in Bando de Brincantes, that you said very well, in Brazil. So I would like to share this video with you if possible. I don't know if you have the link. I sent the link to, but here, yeah, so please.
Percussive vibrations for Sudan. Oppressed people of Sudan, we hear you. Children of Sudan, we resonate with you. Inside the womb, the beating of a heart, the first sound that starts for life to start. In every human, universal echoes claim. Percussive rhythm allows experiences to remain. When winds grip, distorts values and emotions, the drumming beats lose their balance, making noise. Abominable actions become chosen options. The sound of love turns into a broken voice. Percussive gunshots reverberate with dread. Percussive bombs echo the vibes of death. How can winners boast about what they have led? Ceasing lives, young and old, in one breath. Oppressed people of Sudan, we hear you. Children of Sudan, we resonate with you. Each individual resonates in community. Each community resonates with the entire world. So why can't we perceive a coherent unity and generous ears to hear the stories to be told? Amidst natural disasters, hunger, wars, rich countries display gardens with plenty of flowers, nurtured by past and present blood and scars, from the people who they abuse to build their power. Now, comfortably watching the news on the couch, they try to dry the ocean of their cathartic satires under the beating of popcorn to fill their mouth, switching to the football to cheer, avoiding fears. The bright percussive sound of bumping coins guides the path of this selected empathy. Since some brutalities call compassion to get a joy, and others don't deserve a glance of sympathy. How can powerful nations just close their eyes while an enslaved child works until she dies? Babes starving, raped women, abused elderly, violence, and on the top, international forces and their deadly silence. Oppressed people of Sudan, we hear you. Children of Sudan, we resonate with you. Sudan, enchantable, gorgeous land of pyramids of hope. Your rich culture is in contrast with your sorrow. The entire world should bring you a better tomorrow, in the harmonic rhythm of a future to unfold. May oppressed people's hope result in trust. May the wind of justice clean the evil dust, which is hiding your fantastic cultural heirlooms and hindering new ones from blowing song. Percussive joy, a better place for every girl and each boy. Oppressed people of Sudan, we hear you. Children of Sudan, we resonate with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Juguero, for the most wonderful poem. And we will also share the link on Facebook for both the poem and the article. The poem is, as mentioned, available in multiple languages, and the article is free to view, which is incredible. Thank you so much. I'm always here for accessible academia, so thank you for creating that. And yeah, we'll share that through our Facebook group and through the Gedamna Elsabah networks as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our next speaker is Dr. Vivienne Glance, a playwright, performer, and prose and poetry writer. Vivienne's work has been published and presented in Australia and internationally. She holds a PhD in creative writing from the University of Western Australia, and her creative interests lie at the intersection of science, art, and society, environmental activism, and cultural diversity. Over 15 of Vivienne's plays have been produced, and several have been nominated or have received awards. Vivienne's novel Semblance is shortlisted for the 2023 Dorothy Hewitt Award. It was described by the judges as a big-hearted ego novel set that pulses with a fierce immediacy, dense with the sense impression of forest and life. In collaboration with Afeif Ismail, Vivienne often co-transcreates his work into English as well. Thank you so much for joining us today, Vivienne.
There we go. Thank you. Absolutely my pleasure. I would just like to read two poems. One of them is called Ripples, and this was in it's a memory of someone who I lost. One leaf falls slowly, slowly, caressing distance like a star. It spins out its life and flutters to dust below. Music stirs in the space in between, like balm on chapped lips, as mellow fruited notes spread into air. You caressed the earth like ripples in tall grass, smiling your knowing, now visible only in memory. And the second one is, again, one I hope that speaks to today's theme of human rights, and one which human rights will only really come here when we have peace in the world. And this one is called Peace. You are a crumbling rock. You are a dream in patchwork. You are a giant balanced on a splinter. You are a basket of guilt. You are an outward breath. You are dust on the shelf of memory. You are the hands of a baby. You are a glance at meaning. You are the crease in the curtain of denial. You are the greens of valleys. You are a splash on a canvas. You are the water on desert seeds. And you are the blossoming of niggling questions. Who laid bare the kernel? Who stencils humanity? Who will embrace this flame? You are the mournful song, and you are the hopeful prayer. Thank you so much for the invitation today. I'm really pleased to be part of this. Looking forward to hearing some more of your wonderful work, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such gorgeous poetry, Vivienne, and for sharing. Just always I'm blown away by the beauty of your recitation and the beauty of the work you create. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, thank you.
Our next guest is joining us via an audio recording from California in the United States, a Sudanese poet, critic, and short story writer currently residing in America. Mr. Osama Elkhawad is a voice of our times, and we are delighted that although he couldn't join us in person, he sent through a recording of one of his poems in Arabic. So that will be played now.
حرب وأنتم ونحن جميعا بخير نعد التوابيت منقوشة أكفأنا وأنتم ونحن جميعا بخير نعد التوابيت منقوشة بكوابيس أطفالنا ونضمخ أكفاننا بالنبيذ الفرنسي والذكريات السعيدة نرسل الأمنيات إلى العائدين من الحرب والذاهبين إليها بنصف فؤاد وربع خيال وفيض حنين وأطنان ذعر سيخفونه بالرقى والأناشيد والتمتمات. الأسيرات يكتبون تلك الرسائل مفروشة بالحنين المخاتل، تلك التي لن يرد عليها أحد. تحمل الآلهات على صهوات الجياد، السعادة من خلفنا والقيامة قدامنا، فيخط الجدود كتاب وصاياهم العشر قبل انتصاف نهار هزائمهم ويدسونه في خواب الرثاء المعتق. ثم تلوذ السلالة بالصمت تبحث عن هدنة لالتقاط الخيال لكي تضع الحرب أوزارها. ونقول لأعدائنا كل سلم وأنتم ونحن جميعا بخير. دعونا نحكم ما قد تبقى لنا من فهوم ونبحث عن صيغة لاقتسام الوئام، فتسقط من شجر الدمع ضاد وميم وياء وراء ننيخ المراثي على عتبات البيوت. نقيم متاحف للهولوكوست بقلب فراديسنا، ونؤجر ندابة لضحايا الحروب التي لم تزل بعد طازجة في مخيلة القادة الوطنيين والعسكريتاريا. ونلجم ما قد يزينه القلب للناس في لحظة الزهو من شغف بالمطامع عبر مرايا الوساوس نصطحب المرمدات إلى فسحة في شعاب الغياب، نصطحب المرمدات إلى فسحة في شعاب الغياب، في شعاب الغياب.
So that was the incredible Mr. Osama Elkhawad joining us by audio recording from California in the United States. Our next guest speaker is Mr. Muneim Rahama, also known as Muneim Rahama. A Sudanese journalist, author, poet, human rights activist. He became known for participating in cultural events in Khartoum and Wad Madani since the 1980s. Thank you so much for joining us.
ثرثرة على هامش صوته إلى الفلاح العظيم مصطفى سيد أحمد، مطربا وصديقا. ولا تمشي في الأرض مرحا، إنك لن تخرق الأرض ولن تبلغ الجبال طولا. وقل ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي أن يحضرون. إلي أيها المتعبون، إلي. هكذا أصعد مشنقتي ولا تطولني، متخففا من عدا براق صوتك، مزدانا بأكثر القليل الأسودان، الخبز والماء. هل كان أحدهما يرطب لهاتك مغتلما هو الآخر، حيث النساء تتمرغ عارية في قمر صوتك وتقرئك السلام فتقرئها البنون. هكذا إذن أخذتك تلك الكلية المنفى وذهبت رافعا بلوانا إلى الملكوت. ولا تقف ما ليس لك به علم، إن السمع والبصر والفؤاد كل أولئك كان عنه مسؤولا. أخالك راجا أنوارهم كذا، تنضمهم ملكا ليرمحوا صوتك لاهيا عن نيرانهم بلظى وتري. والبريد غزا الفتنة شال الليل. البريد غزا الفتنة شال الليل. هكذا حين كانت الأشجار مجتمعة عليك، حصبت عصافيرها الأنتينات معلنة خروجك عن طوع بثها. هكذا أيها الفلاح العظيم، إذ تكون الكلمة خصيصة خلاص تأتيك الأرض متسقطة حرارة يديك، وأنت تجوس خصرها بنغمة جدول. هكذا كما القرى في سماء طوبى أطراف السحر الشمال، كما نقع تزير بات الليل بطوله يسامر قلب الجنوب. وإلي بلادنا وكلنا إخوان، سوداني بلادنا هكذا كما وأنت مشمرا كمي فمك بادئا اعتراقنا بجرف يشخب دمه الغزال هكذا بقبضة زانة واحدة تدخلنا ولا نبرح هكذا كما نصل ضوضأه الغضب هل تراه ينتكس خميرا صوتك من هذا الراكز زنده هل يخب في الوحل صوتك من هذا الساهر قلبه المتمترس عفو الجبل صوتك كانوا يوقدون عواد الذرة القمح وبينهم قرعة لبن دافئ صوتك تتنهد أصابع شجنهم وهي تنضد أحرف الرصاص صوتك تتوهج كراريسهم متدافعة صوب مدرجات الجامعة صوتك تبرق زنازين همهم وهي تتكرف هبوب الدعاش صوتك وبعد يكتفي الخاكيون الترابيون بإطلاق النيران حال تململ الشعب صوت. شكرا.
Thank you so much, Mr. Muneim Rahama, for this incredible poem. Apologies that we couldn't get you on camera, but what a beautiful dedication to the late and great Ustaz Mustafa Ahmed. I think I knew Mustafa Ahmed music before I even knew how to speak. Who in Sudan hasn't? An activist and an artist, a singer, songwriter, and composer. Mustafa Ahmed absolutely shaped the lives of everyone who knew him in his lifetime and onwards. And composing the works of well-known poets like Mahjoub al-Sharif. Both of them were voices for resistance for such a long time. Thank you so much for sharing such a beautiful tribute to him. Our next guest is actually myself, and it's always quite strange to introduce oneself. So please bear with me as I do that. My name is Rafeif Ismail. I'm an award-winning multilingual storyteller and editor based in Boorloo, Western Australia. My work has been published in magazines and anthologies across Australia and internationally, with a debut novel forthcoming. I'm deeply committed to creating diverse works, spaces, and ethical storytelling. And as such, I'm the current manager. Since 2020, I've been the managing director of Jet Press, and a publication that focuses on First Nations and people of colour voices within Australia, within so-called Australia and Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I am the co-founder of Long Track Press, a speculative fiction publication founded in 2003 for writers in so-called Australia and Aotearoa, New Zealand. In 2022, I had the pleasure of co-editing Unlimited Futures, speculative visionary Black and Black fiction, published by Fremantle Press and Jet Press, an anthology of multilingual speculative fiction that was a conversation between First Nation Australians and Afro-Black settlers on this continent. And I am the recipient of the 2023 Martin Bequest Scholarship for Prose. So I'm very much a prose writer and not a poet, so please do bear with me. This poem I wrote I wrote this poem after the coup in 2021. I'd written it because there were no words to describe the loss of hope that came with, and the devastation that came with that event. So this poem is called Ghosts. I try not to speak with the words of ghosts, but sometimes my voice slips between here, there, and the thereafter. The protesters chant, Shuhadana ma matu, Aishin ma thawar, like a prayer. Our children become martyrs before they have the chance to live. The protesters chant, Shuhadana ma matu, Aishin ma thawar, like a plea. Our rivers are graveyards. The great poet Mahjoub Sharif said, Al-Sha'bi Habibu Shiryani, Adani Butaga Shakhsiya. And I remember that our people sometimes bleed out inside their own bodies. I think of bullets that shatter on impact. I think on the shrapnel of dispossession, the ricochet of trauma, generation after generation after generation after generation with no exit wound. Al-Sha'bi Habibu Shiryani, Ad-Dani Bitaga Shakhsiya. The protesters filled the streets, surging like Nile tides, unquenchable in their thirst for Hurriya, Salam, wa Adala. The hymnal chants carry with them the years, the memories, the loss, their ululations, rising, falling, and rising again, like resistance, like resilience. We will never go back. And yet I am asked to separate the words, to separate the worlds, to walk away from the footsteps of titans and ignore the sounds of resistance, rebellion, rebuilding, to fill the mold of a world that prizes silence more than peace, freedom, and justice. How dare you ask that of me? So that's the first poem, Ghosts. The second poem that I'll be sharing is a poem that was written when I was a lot younger. I wrote it in 2016 and published it in 2018. And I think that unfortunately, it's still relevant now, especially as we look at the multiple genocides across the world. So in this poem, I'm dedicating it to every dispossessed young person and every young person who is waiting and working towards freedom. We send you our children, our hopes, our dreams, our futures. You return them, bent and broken, a breath away from shattering. And you have the gall to ask, why are you all so overprotective? We're the ones who piece their bodies back together. We're the ones who scrub their blood off the floor. And yet, still, you have the gall to ask, why won't they let it go? Why won't you let it go? We hold on tight because in these moments of joy, of pain, in these moments of joy and pain and laughter, which become empty spaces in photographs, if for an instant our children slip our grasp, we send you our children full of hope. We send you ourselves full of hope. You send back body bags. And just one last poem. It's a heavy thing to carry, the weight of language, both living and lost. It's fine, in parentheses, a lie. Sometimes when the silence is too loud, when stumbling between bilingual thoughts leave me adrift between here, there, nowhere, I try to remember how to shape my mouth around hope without it burning with the strain. Hurriya salamu adala, in parentheses, always sincere. It's a jarring thing, the loss of language, gradually fading like earth under concrete going dormant. How do you describe life waiting to spring forth, hampered by immutable barriers? Al-Madaniyya khiyar al-Sha'b, and it's an old thing, that language of loss. Easy in the worst ways. We have phrases and formulations because they are gone, 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 never to speak again. Phrases that mean nothing but everything, because worse than grief is grief in isolation. And I wonder sometimes, will someone speak for me when I am earth once more? Will they shape me alive again in stories, in thoughts, or will I be forgotten, remembered in fragments that carry weight but lose meaning? Will I transmute into what I cannot speak, or will my voice still sound over foreign and familiar homes? Thank you so much. So that's all from me. Our next speaker is Mr. Jerry-Adesewo, a writer, theatre producer, director, and cultural administrator. He's the founder and artistic director of Rosa Royal Theatre, a private theatre outfit in Nigeria, and which has become a household on account of his creative outputs. As a cultural journalist, he has written for Next Newspaper, The Guardian, Daily Trust, National Mirror, amongst others. And his theatre company is currently staging the first ever Ajuba International Theatre Festival. Well, staged the first ever International Theatre Festival in Ajuba between October 31st and November 5th of this year. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay. All right. So thank you for this very great opportunity. My apology to start with. I guess I lost my sense of timing. I was waiting for 7 p.m. until I got the prompt. only to discover it's 7 p.m. Australia and not 7 p.m. Nigeria. I mean, it's been so great listening to the earlier performances, especially the last one, and I think that was quite interesting. I mean, I must have missed Viviane. Well, maybe I should just let my poem, do the talking. I did this poem actually sometime in October after the project by Vivienne, where I helped to translate the poem she made into Yoruba, and had a Yoruba performance of that poem. So that inspired me to also do something, which is the poem I am going to share with you now. If you ask me, I would not name myself a poet. I would just simply say I am a theater maker, but of course, I do write poetry myself. And so I'm going to start this with a song you might not understand, but it will just be the baseline, for what I am going to talk about in the poem. And that song is Yoruba. So that's why I said you might not understand it. It's a Yoruba song. I will tell you what it means, and I will try again to sing it as best as I can do in a cappella, and that is without instrumentation. And that song simply says, Igi gogoro, Igi gogoro, Igi gogoro, Igi gogoro no mi duro ki ma ṣubú. Igi gogoro, Igi gogoro, Igi gogoro, Igi gogoro no mi duro ki ma ṣubú. And then I'll go into the poem. I'll tell you what the song means later. And the poem is titled Echoes of Hope When the Sun Goes Down. In Sudan's heart, where the Nile's embrace once cradled dreams, I found myself amidst a nation's struggle. Ancient wisdom echoed in the air, weaving a tapestry of cultures now entwined in the turmoil of our present reality. Beneath the vast expanse of azure sky, I witnessed the fragmentation of unity, a bond now shattered by the harsh ants of strife. The haunting cries of anguish reverberated through the land, a symphony of pain that echoed humanity's collective mourning. My Sudan, once proud and noble, carried a history too profound for its current state. Innocence lay broken and the promise of peace seemed elusive. In the desert's veins, courage paused, a heartbeat drowned out by the shadows, claiming many a heart. As I stood beneath the warmth of the sun, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the nation's tears. Children wept for the time when tranquility was not a distant memory. Through the tumultuous waves of strife, I took my stand, holding on to the belief that unity and love would reclaim that very essence of our land. The world bore witness to Sudan's plea, a desperate call for peace, justice, and a restoration of our shared humanity. Amidst the ruins of despair, solidarity emerged as a guiding light, a silent but powerful force where empathy became our common language. In the midst of the haunting experience, where freedom's song seemed muffled by the winds of change, I found solace in Sudan's resilient spirit. Each wounded soul became a testament to our collective strength. In unity and empathy, I believed, humanity would find its way back, and the land would once again resonate with the echoes of hope. Igi gogoro, Igi gogoro, Igi gogoro, Igi gogoro no mi duro ki ma ṣubú. That's my submission. And the song itself simply says, "Tall tree, uphold me, let me fall not." And I think that is the plea of everyone that matters for the situation in Sudan today, and maybe Sudan as to connect with every other places where there is crisis in Africa and maybe around the world. It behoves on us to raise our voices, to make the noise, to stand in solidarity with the innocent lives, especially that are at the receiving end of this many crises and the situation that we find ourselves today. And so that's my plea, to all who matters in Sudan, whether in Sudan or outside of Sudan, but that have some kind of heritage or roots to Sudan, because we must all let our voices be heard. We might not have the political power, but of course we have the voice, to make this call and to ensure that Sudan regains its old self as that heritage of wisdom, as that heritage of a lot of of African heritage, which has been plundered by the war and the crisis that is currently on board. Thank you for this opportunity, and here I stop. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such an incredible poem, and for sharing it in your language as well. It really resonates, and your point about solidarity both within Africa and internationally absolutely is absolutely valid. I think it was the great Audre Lorde who said, when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcome, but when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it's better to speak. And yeah, I know that that's not the complete quote, but yeah, I think it is always better to speak and always better to share through poetry. Our next speaker is Afeif Ismail. Afeif is an accomplished international award-winning Sudanese Australian artist. He's recognized as a bilingual playwright, poet, essayist, director, dramaturg, and human rights activist. His works have been translated into German, Spanish, and Swedish. Afeif's poetry and short stories have been featured in numerous anthologies, and he secured the prestigious 2022 Berliner Region for Refugees Seeking Asylum Poetry Prize. In collaboration with Dr. Vivienne Glance, Afeif co-translates his work into English. Please join us, Afeif.
Thank you, Rafeif. I acknowledge that I live, work, create, and heal in Bolero, the land of the Wajak Nunga people, known by the settlers' name of birth. As a settler refugee, I would like to pay my deepest respects to the First Nation, elder, past, and present across the continent, and their ongoing culture. I recognize that sovereignty was never ceded. This is and always will be Aboriginal land. Refugees forced to flee from their heartland, forced to flee from their heartland, not fearing death, but demanding life. Year after year, their alien soul shrivel. They are returning, not for the heavy weight of the nostalgia, but to be buried in their homeland. The final poem, I'm going to read the first version of it in Arabic, and after that, I will read the English version. الدخان يتصاعد مثل أفاعٍ سامة. رأى الطفل دخانا يتصاعد في السماء مثل ثعابين طائرة مزعورة تلهث لتتنفس. لماذا هذه الألعاب النارية عالية الفرقعات يا أمي؟ ولماذا تجبريني على وضع أصابعي على أذني والنوم طوال الليل تحت السرير؟ أتعلمين يا أمي أنا أحب الاستلقاء على السرير في الفناء الخلفي لبيتنا كل ليلة، وأن أحسب عدد النجوم التي تغمز لي بين كل لحظة وأخرى، وطير الليل العابرة تحت ضوء القمر مثل طائرة الورقية عندما تسرقها الريح من يدي. من هو هذا الشخص الذي يطغى كل يوم هذه الألعاب النارية المرعبة التي تكاد أن تثقب أذناي وتنزع قلبي؟ أرجوك يا أمي، أرجوك يا أمي أجعليها تتوقف. Smoke rises like snakes. The child sees smoke rising into the sky, like frightened snake gasping for breath. Oh, Mom, why are those fireworks banging so high? Why do you force me to put my fingers in my ears and sleep each night under the bed? You know, Mom, I like to lie on the bed on our backyard, counting the stars that wink at me and the bird that pass by in the moonlight like my kite when the wind steals it from my hands. I want to sleep on my bed. Who is this who loves scary games? Who fires those terrifying fireworks that almost pierces my ears and rip off my heart? Please, please, Mom, please, Mom, please, Mom, make it stop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Afeif, for those poems and for sharing in both languages. Our final reader for the night is Dr. Vivienne Glance, reading the iconic poem Maryam and May by the late great Mr. Mahjoub Sharif. Mahjoub Sharif is, in my opinion, and objectively, one of the greatest poets of the 20th century and 21st century. His poetry has shaped his poetry has been part of shaping the Sudanese resistance movement, and his work is always remembered. It's been immortalized in song, and it's been part of every day. The first poem that I ever heard, that I ever remember hearing, was Butaqa Shakhsiya by Mahjoub Sharif. For a long time, I knew it more than I knew like the Sudanese national anthem. So yeah, no, his so Viv, thank you so much for reading his poem, Maryam and May, in English.
Maryam and May by Mahjoub Sharif, co-transcreated from Arabic by myself, Vivienne Glance, and Afeif Ismail. Mariam and May, my daughters, you heard my voice and you came, emerging from the prison corners like ivy, and from between the bayonet and the bolts and the shadows and the edges of the door, and over the fence like a star and a sparrow, running like a flowing spring woven from tomorrow's fraying hope and the fields of saplings in our land. Your mother's presence is in my heart. You brought to me a sail of her saris and a handkerchief made from the threads of light beams, and a note lined with the day's brightness, and her handwriting full of lively feeling. She said to me, hello, father of Mariam and Mai. Your perseverance is a torch in my hands. Your daughters keep their heads held high and defy their oppressors and never say unright words. I swear to you, we are not broken after you were taken. Those who lived must return, and a bright dawn will come. And suddenly the people will rise up and fill the streets of Khartoum. Convoys of people will crawl out of the villages, sing, sing, and chant, rise up, Sudan. Rise up, Sudan. Rise up above the horizon.
Thank you so much, Vivienne, for the wonderful translation and for reciting that iconic poem in English. We have a few announcements from Afeif before I conclude the night. So Afeif, could you please join us?
من فعاليات منتدى قدامنا الصباح الثقافي القادمة حماية الممتلكات الثقافية السودانية في ظل النزاع المسلح، وحيتحدث فيها دكتورة محاسن يوسف، دكتور محمد عبد السلام، ودكتور إسماعيل حامد. حتكون يوم السبت 16 ديسمبر. الفعالية اللي بعدها حتكون يوم السبت 23 ديسمبر 2023 عن كتاب حوارية لاهاي للمفكر السوداني الكبير دكتور عبدالله بولا، وستتحدث فيها الأستاذة نجاة محمد علي، دكتورة فاطمة بابكر، دكتور قصي همرور، دكتور عادل القصاص، ويدير الحوار الأستاذ عبد الخالق السر. أما عن برامجنا في السنة الجديدة، حيكون دور الفكر في إحداث التغيير في السودان، قراءة في فكر الأستاذ محمود محمد طه، وحيقدمها دكتور عبد الله الفكي البشير. دي حتكون يوم السبت 20 يناير. وعن الأغنية الوطنية في مواجهة الاستعمار حيتحدث لنا الأستاذ أسهري عبد القادر والأستاذ ناصر عز الدين الشهير باللندي، وده حتكون يوم السبت 27 يناير. خليكم معنا في برامجنا القادمة. شكرا.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you to all of our speakers tonight and to everyone who's joined us across Facebook and who will be seeing this recording. Thank you to everyone who's joined us. From all around the world on International Human Rights Day to share poetry and to do the work of international collaboration and resistance together. It's been an absolute honor, and I can't wait to see you at the next event and follow all of your poems. For those who are joining us on social media, you'll find the links mentioned underneath the post, and feel free to share with your networks. Thank you.
ليلوم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ليلوم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، ليلوم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ليلوم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ونحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح.